Chapter 58. Jason. So, it was a storm day. Auster, the Roman version of the South Wind, was holding court. The 2 previous days, Jason had dealt with Notus, while the gods, Greek version, were fiery and quick to anger. At least he was quick. Auster, well, not so much. White and red marble columns lined the throne room. The rough sandstone floor smoked under Jason's shoes. Steam hung in the air like the bathhouses usually didn't have thunderstorms. Crackling across the ceiling, lighting the room in this orienting flashes, thousand venti swirled through the hall of clouds of red. In clouds of red dust, superheated air. Jason was careful to stay away from them. On his first day here, he'd accidentally brushed his hand through one. He got so many blisters, his fingers looked like tentacles. At the end of the room was the strangest throne Jason had ever seen. Made of equal parts fire and water, the dais was a bonfire. Flames of smoke curled up to form a seat. The back of the chair was a churning storm cloud. The armrest sizzled where moisture met fire. It didn't look very comfortable, but the god Auster lounged on it, like he was ready for an easy afternoon watching football. Standing up, he would have been about 10 feet tall. A crown of steam wrenched his shaggy white hair. His beard was made of clouds, constantly popping with lightning and raining down on the god's chest, soaking his sand-coloured toga. Jason wondered if you could have a thundercloud beard. You thought it might be annoying to rain on yourself all the time, but Auster didn't seem to care. He reminded Jason of a soggy Santa Claus, but more lazy than jolly. So the god's voice rumbled like an oncoming front. The son of Jupiter returns. Auster made it sound like Jason was late. Jason was tempted to remind the stupid wind god that he had spent hours outside every day waiting to be hauled. But he just bowed. "My lord," he said, "have you received any news of my friend?" "Friend? Leo Voldex." Jason tried to stay patient. The one who was taken by the winds? "Oh yes, or rather no. We have had no word. He was not taken by my winds. No doubt this was the work of Boreas or his spawn. Yes, we knew that. That is the only reason I took you in, of course." Auster's eyebrows rose into his resource steam. Boreas must be opposed. The north winds must be driven back. "Yes, my lord. But to oppose Boreas, we really need to get our ship out of the harbour." "Ship in the harbour?" The god leaned back and chuckled, rain pouring out of his beard. "You know that last time mortal ships came into my harbour, the King of Libya, Percy was his name. He blamed me for the scorching winds that burned his crops. Can you believe it?" Jason gritted his teeth. He'd learned that Auster couldn't be rushed. In his rainy form, he was sluggish and warm and random. "How did you burn those crops, my lord?" "Of course." Auster smiled naturedly. "But what did Pythagoras expect? Planting crops at the edge of the Sahara? The fool launched his entire fleet against me. He intended to destroy my stronghold so the south wind could never blow again. I destroyed his fleet, of course." "Of course?" Auster narrowed his eyes. "You aren't with Percy are you? No, Lord Auster. I'm Jason Gray, son of Jupiter. Yes, of course, I like sons of Jupiter's, but why are you still in my harbour? Jason suppressed a sigh. We don't have your permission to leave, my lord. Also, our ship is damaged. We need our mechanic, Leo Roldeck, to repair the engine unless you know of another way. Auster held up his fingers and let a dust devil swirl between them like a baton. You know, people accuse me of being fickle. Some days I am scorching the wind, the destroyer of crops, the sirocco from Africa. Other days I am gentle, heralding the warm summer rains and cooling fogs of the southern Mediterranean. And in the off-season I am lovely place in Cancun. At any rate, in ancient times, mortals both feared me and loved me. For God unpredictable can be a strength. Then you are truly strong, Jason said. Thank you, yes, but the same is not true of demigods. Auster leaned forward, close enough so that Jason could smell rain-soaked fields and hot sandy beaches. You remind me of my own children, Jason Grace. Jason Grace, you have blown from palace to palace. You have blown from place to place. You are undecided. You change day to day. If you could turn the windsock, which way would it blow? Sweat trickled between Jason's shoulder blades. Excuse me. You say you need a navigator. You need my permission. I say you need it. You need neither. I say you need neither. It is time to choose a direction. A wind that blows aimlessly is of no use to anyone. I don't understand. Even as he said it, he did understand. Nico had talked about not belonging anywhere. At least Nico was free. Attachments. He'd go wherever he chose. For months, Jason had been wrestling with the question of where he belonged. He always chafed against the traditions of Camp Jupiter. The power plays, inviting, but Raina was a good person. She needed his help. If he turned his back on her, someone like Octavian could take over and run everything Jason did love about New Rome. Could he be so selfish as to believe? The very idea crushed him with guilt, but in his heart he wanted to be at Camp Half-Blood. The months he'd spent there with Piper and Leo and felt more satisfied and more right than all his years at Camp Jupiter. Besides, at Camp Half-Blood, there was at least chance he might meet his father someday. The gods hardly ever stopped by Camp Jupiter to say hello. Jason took a shaky breath. Yes, I know the direction I want to take. Good, and we need a way to fix the ship. Is there Auster raised the index finger, still expecting guidance from the wind lords? A son of Jupiter should know better. Jason hissed, we're leaving Lord Auster today. The wind god grinned and spread his hand. At last you announce your purpose. Then you have my permission to go. Though you do not need it. And how will you sail without your engineer? Without your engines fixed? Jason felt the south wind zipping around him, whining in challenge like headstrong mustangs testing his will. All week he had been waiting, hoping Auster would decide to help. For months he had worried about obligations to Camp Jupiter, hoping his path would become clear. Now he realized he simply had to take what he wanted. He had to control the winds, not the other way round. You're going to help us, Jason said. Your venting can take the form of horses. You'll give us a team. You'll give us a team to pull the Argo. They'll lead us to wherever Leo is. Wonderful, Auster beamed. His beard flashed with electricity. Now, can you make good on those bold words? Can you control what you ask for? or you'll be torn apart." The god clapped his hands. Wind swirled around his throne and took the form of horses. These weren't dark and cold like Jason's friend Tempest. The south wind horses were made of fire, sand, and a hot thunderstorm. 4 of them raced past their heart, their heat singeing the hair of Jason's arms. The heat singeing the hair of Jason's arms. They galloped around the marble columns, spitting flames, neighing with a sound like sandblasters. The more they ran, the wilder they became. They started to eye Jason, also stroked his rainy beard. "Do you know why the Venti can appear as horses, my boys? Every so often we wind gods travel the earth in equine form. On occasion, we've been known to sire the fastest of all the horses." "Thanks," Jason muttered, though his teeth were chattering with fear. "Too much information." One of the Venti charged at Jason. He ducked aside, his clothes smoking from the close call. "Sometimes," also continued, "cheerful mortals recognize our diving blood. They will say that horses run, that horse runs like the wind, and for a good reason, like the fastest stallions. The Venti are our children." The wind horses began to circle Jason. "Like my friend Tempest," he ventured. "Oh, well," Sister cowed. "I fear that is a child of boys. How you tamed him, I will never know. These are my own offspring. A fine team of southern winds. Control them, Jason Grace, and they will pull your ship from the harbour." Control them, Jason thought. Yeah, right. They ran back and forth, working up a frenzy, like their masters, the south wind. They were conflicted, half hot, dry, stirrico. A stormy thunderhead. Sorry about that. I'm getting a little bit tired. "I need speed," Jason thought. "I need purpose." He envisioned Notus, the Greek version of the south wind, blistering hot but very fast. In that moment he chose Greek. He threw in his lot with Camp Half-Blood, and the horses changed. The storm clouds inside burned away, leaving nothing but red dust and shimmering heat like mirages on the Sahara. On the throne room now sat Notus, a bronze-skinned old man in a fiery Greek chiton, his head crowned with a wreath of withered smoking barley. "What are we waiting for?" the god prompted. Jason turns toward the fiery wind steeds. Suddenly he wasn't afraid of them. Then he thrust out his hand. A swirl of dust shot towards the nearest horse. A lasso, a rope of wind, more tightly wound than any tornado, wrapped around the horse's neck. The wind formed a halter and brought the beast to a stop. Jason summoned another wind rope. He lashed the second horse, blinding it to his will. Less than a minute he had tethered all 4 Venties. He reined them in, still whining and bucking, but they couldn't break Jason's rope. It felt like flying 4 kites in a strong wind. Hard, yes, but not impossible. Very good, Jason Grace noticed it. You are a son of Jupiter, yet you have chosen your own path, as all the greatest demigods have done before you. You cannot control your team to prowl, and direct them towards Malta. Malta? Jason tried to focus, but the heat from the horses was making him lightheaded. He knew nothing about Malta except for some vague story about Maltese falcon. Were malts invented there? Once you arrive in the city of Valaton, Noda said, you'll no longer need these horses. You mean we'll find Leo there? The god shimmered, slowly fading into waves of heat. Your destiny grounds of clear, Jason Grace. When their choice comes again, storm or fire. Remember me and do not despair. The doors of the throne room burst open. The horses, smelling freedom, bolted for the exit. Chapter 59. Jason. At 16, most kids would stress about parallel parking tests, getting a driver's license, and affording a car. Jason stressed about controlling a team of fiery horses with wind ropes. After making sure his friends were aboard and safely below deck, he lashed the Venti to the prow of the Argo tube, which Festus was not happy about. Straddled the figurehead and yelled, "Giddy up!" The Venti tore across the waves. They weren't quite as fast as Hazel's horse, Arian, but they had a lot more heat. They kicked up a rooster tail of steam that made it almost impossible for Jason to see where they were going. The ship shot out of bay. In no time, Africa was a hazy line on the horizon behind them. Maintaining the wind ropes took all of Jason's concentration. The horses strained to break free. Only his willpower kept them in check. Malta, he ordered. Straight to Malta. By the time land finally appeared in distance, a hilly island carpet with low stone rhymes. Where am I? Sorry, Lone Stone. Low stone buildings. Jason was soaked in sweat. His arms felt rubbery, like he'd been holding a barbell straight out in front of him. He hoped they'd reach the right place, because he couldn't keep the horses together any longer. He released the wind reins. The Venti scattered into particles of sand and steam. Exhausted, Jason climbed down from the prow. He leaned against Festus's neck. The dragon tone gave him a chin hug. "Thanks, man," Jason said. Rough day, huh? Behind him, the deck boards creaked. "Jason!" Piper called. "Oh, God, your arms!" He hadn't noticed, but his skin was dotted with blisters. Piper unwrapped a square ambrosia. "Eat this," he chewed. His mouth was filled with the taste of fresh brownies, his favourite treat from the bakery in New Rome. The blisters faded on his arms. His strength returned. But the brownie ambrosia tasted more bitter than usual. as if it somehow knew that Jason was turning his back on Camp Jupiter. This was no longer the taste of home. "Thanks, Pipes," he murmured. "How long was I? About 6 hours?" "About 6 hours." Wow, Jason thought. No wonder he felt sore and hungry. The others, all fine, tired of being cooped up. Should I tell them it's safe to come above deck? Jason licked his dry lips. Despite the ambrosia, he felt shaky. Shaky. He didn't want the others to see him like this. "Give me a second," he said. Catch my breath." Pirate leaned to him in her green tank top, her bead shorts and her hiking boots. She looked like she was ready to climb a mountain and then fight an army at the top. Her dagger was strapped to her belt. Her cornucopia was slung over one shoulder. She'd taken to wearing the jagged bronze sword she'd recovered from Zeus the Boread, which was only slightly less intimidating than an assault rifle. During their time at Auster's palace, Jason had watched Piper and Hazel spend hours sword fighting. Something Piper had never been interested in before. Since her encounter with Chiron, Piper seemed more Piper felt more wired and tensed up inside like a primed catapult, as if she were determined never to be caught off guard again. Jason understood the feeling, but he worried she was being too hard on herself. Nobody could be ready for anything all the time. He should know. He spent the last fight as a freeze-dried throw rug. He must have been staring, but she gave him a knowing smirk. "Hey, I'm fine. We're fine." She perched on her tiptoes and kissed him, which felt as good as the ambrosia. Her eyes were flecked with so many colours Jason would have stared into them all day, studying the changing patterns. The way people watch the northern lights. "I'm lucky to have you," he said. "Yeah, you are." She pushed his chest gently. "Now, how do we get this ship to the docks?" Jason frowned across the water. They were still half a mile from the island. He had no idea whether they could get the engines working or the sails. Fortunately, Festus had been listening. His face front and blew a plume of fire. The ship's engines clattered and hummed. It sounded like a massive bike with a busted chain, but they lurched forward. Slowly the Argo 2 headed towards the shore. "Good dragon." Papa patted Festus's neck. The dragon's ruby eyes glinted as if he was pleased with himself. "He seems different since you woke him," Jason said. "More alive." "The way he should be," Piper smiled. "I guess once in a while we all need a wake-up call from someone. We all need a wake-up call from someone who loves us." Standing next to her, Jason felt so good. He could almost imagine their future together at Camp Half-Blood. Once the war was over, assuming there was still a camp left to return to, when the choice comes again, Notice had said, "Storm or fire, remember me, and do not despair." The closer they got to Greece, the more dread settled in Jason's chest. He was starting to think Piper was right about the storm of fire linemen in the prophecy. One of them, Jason or Leo, would not come back from this voyage alive, which was why they had to find Leo. As much as Jason loved his life, he couldn't let his friend die for his sake. He could never live with the guilt. Of course he hoped he was wrong. He hoped they both came out of this quest okay. But if not, Jason had to be prepared. He would protect his friends and stop Gare, whatever it took. Do not despair. Yeah, for an immortal wind god to say. As the island got closer, Jason saw docks bristling with sails. From the rocky shoreline rose fortress like sea walls, 50 or 60 feet tall. Above that sprawled a medieval-looking city of church spires, domes, and tightly wedged buildings, all made of the same golden stone. From where Jason stood, it looked as if the city covered every inch of the island. He scanned the boats in the harbour. 100 yards ahead, tied to the end of the longest dock, was a makeshift raft with a simple mast and a square canvas sail. On the back, the row was wired to some sort of machine. Even from this distance, Jason could see the glint of celestial bronze. Jason grinned. Only one demigod would make a boat like that, and he moored it as far out in the harbour as possible, where the Argo too couldn't fail to spot it. Get the others, Jason told Piper. Leo is here. Chapter 60, Jason. Chapter 60, Jason. They found Leo at the top of the city fortifications. He was sitting at an open-air cafe, overlooking the sea, drinking a cup of coffee and dressed in time warp. Leo's outfit was identical to the one he'd worn the day they'd first arrived at Camp Half-Blood. Jeans and a white shirt and an old army jacket, except that jacket had burned up months ago. Piper nearly knocked him out of his chair with a hug. Leo, gods, where have you been? Voldex, Coach Hedge grinned. Then he seemed to remember he had a reputation to protect, and he forced a scowl. You ever disappear like that again, you little punk, I'll knock you into next month. Frank patted Leo on the back so hard it made him wince. Even Nico shook his hand. Hazel kissed Leo on the cheek. We thought you were dead. Leo mustered a faint smile. Hey guys, nah, I'm good. Jason could tell he wasn't good. Leo wouldn't meet their eyes. His hands were perfectly still on the table. Leo's hands were never still. All the energy had drained right out of him, replaced by a kind of wistful sadness. Jason wondered why his expression seemed familiar. Then he realized Nico D'Angelo had looked the same way after facing Cupid in the ruins of Salona. Leo was heartsick. As the others grabbed chairs from the nearby tables, Jason leaned in and squeezed his friend's shoulders. Hey man, what happened? Hey man, he said. What happened? Leo's eyes swept around the group. The message was clear. Not here. Not in front of everyone. I got marooned, Leo said. Long story. How about you guys? What happened with Kion? Coach Head snorted. What happened? Piper happened. I'm telling you, this girl has skill. This girl has skills. Coach, Piper protested. Heads began retelling the story, but in his version, Piper was a kung fu assassin, and there were a lot more bories. As the coach talked. As the coach talked, Jason studied Leo with concern. This cafe had a perfect view of the harbour. Leo must have seen the Argo 2 sail in. Yet he'd sat here drinking coffee, which he didn't even like, waiting for them to find him. That wasn't like Leo at all. The ship was the most important thing in his life. When he saw it coming to rescue him, Leo should have run down to the docks, whooping at the top of his lungs. Coach Hedge was just describing how Piper had defeated Kion with a roundhouse kick. When Piper interrupted, "Coach," she said, "it didn't happen like that at all. I couldn't have done anything without Festus." Leo raised his eyebrows. But Festus was deactivated. "I'm about that," Piper said. "I sort of woke him up." Piper explained her version of events, how she'd rebooted the Metal Dragon with Charm Speak. Leo tapped his fingers on the table like some of his old energy was coming back. "Shouldn't be possible," he murmured. "Unless the upgrades let him respond to voice commands. But if he's permanently deactivated, that means the navigation system and the crystal..." "Crystal?" Jason asked. Leo flinched. Nothing. Anyway, what happened after the wind bomb went off?" Hazel took up the story. A waitress came over and offered them menus. In no time, they were chowing down on sandwiches and sodas, enjoying the sunny day almost like a group of regular teenagers. Frank grabbed a tourist brochure stuck under the napkin dispenser. He began to read it. Piper patted Leo's arms like she couldn't believe he was really here. Nico stood at the edge of the group, eyeing the passing pedestrians as if they might be enemies. Coach Hedge munched on the salt and pepper shakers. Despite the happy renewal, everybody seemed more subdued than usual, like they were picking up on Leo's mood. Jason had never really considered how important Leo's sense of humour was to the group. Even when things were super serious, they could always depend on Leo to lighten things up. Now it felt like the whole team had dropped anchor. So then Jason harnessed the venti. Hazel finished, and here we are. Leo whistled. "Hot air horses? Dang, Jason, so basic. You had a bunch of gas together all the way to Malta, and then you let it loose." Jason frowned. It doesn't sound so heroic when you put it that way." "Yeah, well, I am an expert on hot air. I'm still wondering why Malta. I just kind of ended up here on the raft." "But was that a random thing, or maybe because of this?" Frank tapped his brochure. "Says here Malta was where Calipiso lived." A pint of blood drained from Leo's chest face. "Well, what now?" Frank shrugged. "According to this, her original home was an island called Gozo, just north of here. Calipiso's a Greek myth thingy, right?" A Greek myth thingy." Coach Hayes rubbed his hands together. Maybe we got to fight her. Do we get to fight her? 'Cause I'm ready." "No," Liam murmured. "No, we don't have to fight her." "Coach!" Piper frowned. "Leo, what's wrong? You look..." "Nothing's wrong." Leo shot to his feet. "Hey, we should get going. We've got work to do." "But where did he go?" Hazel asked. "Where did he get those clothes?" "How? These ladies," Leo said. "I appreciate the concern, but I don't need two extra mums." Piper smiled uncertainly. "Okay, but ships to fix," Leo said. "Festus to check. Earth goddesses to punch. Earth goddesses to punch in the face. What are we waiting for?" Leo's back. He spread his arms and grinned. He was making a brave attempt. But Jason tried to remember the story about her. She was a sorceress of some sort, maybe like Medea or Sarah. But if Leo had escaped from an evil sorcerer's lair, why did he seem so sad? Jason would have to talk to him later, make sure his buddy was okay. For now, Leo clearly didn't want to be interrogated. Jason got up, clapped him on the shoulder. Leo's right. We should get going. Everybody took the cue. They started wrapping up their food and finishing their drinks. Suddenly, Hazel gasped. Hazel gasped. Guys! She pointed... No. Guys! She pointed in the northeast horizon. At first, Jason saw nothing but sea. Then a streak of darkness shot into the air like the black lightning, as if pure night had torn through the daytime. I don't see anything, Coach Hedge grumbled. Me neither, Piper said. Jason scanned his friends' faces. Most of them just looked confused. Nigel was the only one who seemed to have noticed the black lightning. That can't be, Nigel muttered. Greece is still 100 miles away. The darkness flashed again, momentarily leaching the colour from the horizon. You think it's Epiros? Jason's whole skeleton tingled the way he felt when he got hit by 1,000 volts. He didn't know why he could see dark flashes. He wasn't a child of the underworld, but it gave him a bad feeling. Nike nodded. The House of Hades is open for business. A few seconds later, the rumbling sound washed over them. The distant artillery. It's begun, Hazel said. What has? Leo asked. When the next flash happened, Hazel's gold eyes darkened like foil in fire. Gaze final push, she said. The doors of death are working overtime. Their forces are entering the mortal world en masse. We'll never make it, Nike said. By the time we arrived, there'll be too many monsters to fight. Jason set his jaw. We'll defeat them, and we'll make it there fast. We've got Leo back. He'll give us the speed we need. He turned to his friend. Or is that just hot air? Leo managed to say, thanks. Time to fly, boys and girls. He said, Uncle Leo's got a few tricks up his sleeves. The end. Well, not the end of the book, though. The end of the chapter, read me.